All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this month's Customer Expert Exchange session. My name is Dana Alvarenga. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience at SlapFive and also run our Customer X community. And so happy to be joined here today for our guests to talk about ABM and customer marketing for greater retention and expansion, revenue growth. We all love all of those keywords in there: retention, expansion, revenue. Kristina Jaramillo. Am I saying? I should have asked.
Yes. Well,
I don't think I've ever said your last name. So,
it depends on how funny or how official you want to be. It's Jaramillo, but we just do Jaramillo to make it easy.
All right. All right. Very good. Well, if you want to give a quick hello, Kristina.
Hi, thank you for having me, President Personal ABM, and looking forward to this chat. It's something I'm passionate about, as you know, Dana.
Very good. Very good. Awesome. Well, we will get started. And as I mentioned, this topic for this month, this expert exchange is ABM Customer Marketing. And I recently, a couple months ago now, joined Kristina on her podcast, and I shared a little bit of my insights of customer success and customer marketing and when it comes to ABM. So now we're flipping the script a bit and hearing Kristina's insights and ideas around really what we'll start off with how we should be thinking differently about ABM. So that's kind of where we'll level set and start, Kristina.
Sure. When leadership and a lot of go-to-market teams think about ABM, from what I've seen, they're really thinking of it as a top-of-funnel kind of strategy. And ABM is frequently tied to demand gen. But for me, ABM really should be about changing account experiences across the buyer's journey, the customer life cycle, and also about changing those interactions that we're having with those human buyers in the target accounts, where we can drive the greatest profitability. So where we can drive stronger ARR, GRR, and NRR growth. And a lot of teams have been thinking about ABM as putting in, getting new logos into the pipeline, even though go-to-market teams are really struggling with accounts going dark once they're engaged or once they're in the pipeline. So they're thinking of it as a top of funnel, even though in reality, there's much better use for ABM. And the ABM lever with existing customer accounts is where you can really maximize your revenue. And on my ABM Done Right podcast that you were on, like you said, Dana, we had Steve Richard, and he mentioned that in MediaFly, under the direction of their CEO, they know that it's important to land key accounts, but they really have put a stronger focus on enabling customer success teams to protect those at-risk accounts so they can reduce or even remove churn and drive expansion with their most profitable customers. And they're really looking at the long term. They're focused on revenue in year 2, 3, 4, and down the line for future growth. So they want to increase the customer lifetime value because that's where they see that strongest opportunity for future growth down the line. And it's a better business decision to focus on customer stickiness than new sales. And the goalposts, hence the Super Bowl reference, they really need to be moved from ARR and new count acquisition revenue to NRR and expansion revenue. I think that's where ABM plays the best role.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with the strongest opportunity, again, with that expansion, that stickiness. I mean, that's the important aspect of enabling customer success teams to not only protect any at risk, but to grow some of the existing customer base too. So speaking my language, totally agree. And hopefully people joining us and listening in agree with that. And you say as well that teams do not have a marketing problem, a sales problem, or a customer success problem, but they have a go-to-market problem. How do experiences that sales and marketing create impact the customer experience after the deal is closed? What's your kind of take and what you've seen on that?
So the best way I can do explain this is by sharing an example. So one of our clients, Freight and Analytics, was assessing ABM platforms. I think they were honing in on using Demandbase. But we noticed that those platforms are only going to scale their bad transactional sales and marketing processes that was leading for them to have an issue of becoming a nice to have versus a must have. And they were having lower deal sizes because of it. And what they really needed to do was do a complete account-based go-to-market where they were bringing in high-level accounts that are going to see that as a must-have and then accelerate those accounts to revenue. They needed to fix that complete experiences. So they needed to fix everything from interactions that the teams are having across the customer-facing teams. So that's sales, customer marketing, customer success. And they needed to fix those experiences that they were delivering across the pipeline, across the customer lifecycle, versus taking a more targeted demand gen approach with technologies, which a lot of people are doing with ABM. They're kind of thinking that if we get an ABM tool, it's going to fix our problems. And it might fix pipeline, but it doesn't necessarily fix revenue. But before that DAT could fix that experiences, they really need to identify the accounts that would see them as a must-have. Which were the ones that were going to see them as that we need to have you versus it's a nice to have. And before working with us, they were defining their ICP by industry and by freight spend. They weren't segmenting their existing customers to uncover their best fit customers and identify the characteristics of those high value accounts that were using their platform on a daily basis or regular basis versus people that were maybe using it monthly or quarterly or even annually. So that would stick them in the nice to have category if they weren't using it that much. And they weren't looking into how and why their platform was being integrated into daily programs of their most frequent users and how they were utilizing the platform differently than maybe the other users, the ones that were using them really infrequently. They also didn't look into the client's supply chain maturity. So DAT wasn't looking into the characteristics of those on the Gartner's list for the top 25 supply chain organizations, even though 13 of those 25 companies were already existing clients. They weren't uncovering the strategic priorities of those in that top 25 list and to see the role they could play within the strategic organization that would make them that must-have. So failing to identify the key strategic priorities also impacted their effectiveness of their content, of their email and social and live interactions. And in completing a review, we looked at hundreds of pieces of content. So we looked at everything from articles, white papers, case studies, webinars, anything that they had produced. And we noticed the content did provide thought leadership, which is really important, but it was missing a key part. It was missing that commercial insight that's going to help their team teach for differentiation against their competitors. And more importantly for them, the status quo. We noticed that that content didn't reframe their prospects' thoughts on rate benchmarking analytics and show them a new way of using it and the role that it could play in their entire supply chain organization instead of just maybe the users that were already using the tool. They didn't show the impact that predictive rate analytics had at a component level, which is something their competitors don't have, or can't deliver on. They didn't show the impact that they could have on pricing strategies to protect future margin growth, how they were impacting demand planning or distribution and merchandising, so they could reallocate products to balance demand. They didn't show how they could help their sales and marketing plan ahead for promotions at the right time based on demand planning and predictive freight rate benchmarking for minimal impact to margins. So what we found overall was that the marketing content was leading sales to have that nice to have conversations with the VPs and the C-suites. And when we reviewed the data from sales and rev ops that we saw, most of that engagement was with the lower level transportation manager, where that content that they initially had was geared. But when they spoke to the VP of supply chain or maybe a chief supply chain officer, they were consistently directed down a few levels back to that transportation manager or director. So basically, sales wasn't armed with the account intelligence that they needed for these target accounts to uncover areas of prioritization, what maybe the company was already investing in, and where gaps still lie that couldn't affect the outcome that the company was looking to achieve. And they weren't armed with the content to show how their tool should impact the complete organization, where it would become a must-have and an embedded solution. And as a result, sales focused on cost savings and size of their data, which VPs and C-suites didn't really care about because they didn't see how it could play into a bigger picture. And because sales and marketing were having the wrong conversation, customer success was having the wrong conversation, it kind of trickled down. And because they were not embedding their prospects customers weren't embedding the DAP platform across the organization, neither did any of the go-to-market teams that they were interacting with. So focus, time, and resources were spent on the accounts that were basically just yelling the loudest. And, we're asking for customer support versus building key relationships and continuing to evolve with how their solution was used. And when budgets came tighter and the CFOs and supply chain teams were reviewing their spending, they got rid of anything that was a nice to have tech. And when we reviewed the churned clients, we found that in most cases, those were the ones that were only using the solution on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis. So infrequent use is going to make you a nice to have versus that must have. And the experience of one go-to-market team, so whether it's sales or marketing, impacts the others. And there's going to be like that snowball effect that creates the wrong experience across the board. And to me, marketing and sales experiences should lead to the right customer experiences after the deals. That's really where ABM and customer marketing can come into play, where you put the right processes in, the right interactions and experiences together after the deal is signed, so you can protect and expand those accounts more frequently. We want to make sure that you are fixing those experiences ahead of the deal so that it continues afterwards. So once we have that right, we know that we can, where we want to lead the customer to, where we want them to lead that relationship, we can create a sales and marketing experience that can lead accounts to the customer experience that you want to deliver. So everything's related.
That's probably like one of the best use case examples of this, like from the top to the bottom. Like we have a little banner here of coming through of the first like home run here is the failing to identify key strategic priorities also impacted the effectiveness of content. I feel like I've said to my customers, I just see in the industry, in the space of customer marketing, customer success, like content for content's sake does not work. Like that is the old way. Stop putting out content just because someone said we needed content. So I think that's like a really, really important statement that you made. And in the use cases, being able to go back and look at the customer base use cases of what the use cases of the product are, where are their gaps, where are their opportunities, and use those to tie back to your go-to-market initiatives, right? As you mentioned, and having the conversations with the C-suite and the VPs of what needs to be done, what content is relevant, what needs to be done to them. Like that also needs to be bubbled up. Like that needs to be done more.
You have to
make sure the content is exactly. So totally love that breakdown of what you kind of just shared it through of a case study in your customer voice there of what you had of here was the problem, here's how it's solved, and here was the result. So great example there. And with a little bit more about that, how do you see we should be integrating account-based marketing and customer marketing to contribute to this stronger revenue growth that's obviously tied back to these strategic initiatives, right?
Yeah. So like I shared in that particular story, a lot of go-to-market, it's very similar to other go-to-market teams. This is not just the one time I've seen this. A lot of teams are failing to segment and tier their existing customers. So they're not really having a crystal clear picture of who their ideal customer is and what makes them more successful and what kind of value they're actually getting from their solution. That particular customer was focusing on size of the company, which a lot of people do. They, in their case, were focusing on freight marketing spend, where they should have focused on that supply chain maturity, where they were in their supply chain journey. Because then again, they're only going to be seen as a nice to have. They should have focused on strategic priorities that I did mention and that their ICP accounts were initiating. So I'm sure there were commonalities across the board. And they should have looked to see how they were being used by companies that were using them on a daily basis, because that would have said, okay, what makes this company so different? How is it being used across that particular client's organization versus, again, the ones that are just using maybe at the lower level, at the transportation versus the entire company. So the better that you understand a customer which again, everyone knows key part of customer marketing, the more you can create content that's relevant for them, messaging and communications, they're going to be as relevant as you can be to that ICP. So customer marketing should really play a strong role in helping define the ICP and in capturing the customer stories that all go-to-market teams are going to need to prove their relevance and the impact that they have. And this is, it's not we set our ICP and then we're done. Those are things that have to be reevaluated.
That was exactly where I was just going there of how often do you, it's every time you're changing your strategic initiatives, are you looking at your ICP or that too frequent? Sorry, this is a hot topic.
No,
right?
I would just think, because I think every client starts getting new value that maybe you haven't noticed that you are, because I've noticed a lot of times it'd be like, we offer XYZ, and then you'll talk to like your top 10 customers and they will say that, or maybe that'll be low on their list. I don't know if there's like a timing, but I definitely would reevaluate it to make sure that it's not like a set it kind of thing. And then we just keep going with that. I think it's something that evolves as your clients needs change and your offerings change. So like if you start offering something new, your ICP might not fit as well anymore for that particular solution. It all depends, I guess, on the organization. So there's getting back to the question of long-term revenue growth. I do want to share another story. This particular client is called OpenWorks, and they were a facility management service firm. So think cleaning and maintenance and just making sure everything's on the level for different clients. When they came to us, they had really aggressive growth goals. They wanted to hit $100 billion market share by 2030, which was crazy. But despite having an ABM program in place, they were actually working with another firm. They were really always or consistently missing their quarterly and yearly goals. So scaling ABM like they had initially wanted to would not have accelerated their ABM revenue results. Again, I mentioned this earlier, you're only going to scale the bad processes or the processes that really could be tweaked to improve business performance. And they did not have a true defined ICP where there was differentiation and a reason for that facility management firm to be a must-have versus a nice-to-have, because they were having almost like a commodity type of conversation. They were focusing on industry, number of sites, and size of locations. Very, top level, nothing really, they didn't dig a little deeper. They really could be looking for where there were true differentiation was for them. So it became more of not just cleaning floors and bathrooms. They wanted to look at it in the way where they have bigger deal sizes. And most sites we noticed that the accounts that had the bigger accounts were making facility management decisions at regional or corporate level and not at the local level, which was a key characteristic that they were using. So in looking at the accounts that were the win-backs, we also learned that they returned because their new provider offered greater cost savings, but they took a blanket approach which put their operations at risk, which could make anything from losing money to being shut down for regulatory infractions. And on the other hand, our client OpenWorks would streamline best practices across all locations, but would also put in that key layer of considering the individual site needs and requirements. So instead of focusing on industry, they focused on subsets like food manufacturers, healthcare manufacturers, 3PLs and 4PLs, which all have different types of locations. They all have their different nuances, which might be temperature zones. So they couldn't really afford to take a blanket approach because it would put things at risk, like operational risk, financial, and even, again, government regulatory risks. So it was no longer about cleaning. We're changing that conversation to be about the not activities that were being completed, and so they could choose the company based on lowest price. The conversation was changed to how are we going to remove risks from your operations so products can go to market fast and more consistently and there's no interruptions. Ultimately, it was changing the conversations to say, how are we going to remove risk from your P&L? And through working with customer marketing and finding the companies that were using OpenWorks that had the greatest impact, we were able to uncover stories that needed to be told. And we were able to have the team come to each interaction with a point of view about that prospect's business, which is a really key element of ABM. You need to understand their business. We were able to put together content messaging that would reframe the prospect's ideas on facility management and how their approach would impact the supply chain, impact their customers, their operations, finance, not just surface level impacts. And they were now able to share these commercial insights, like I had mentioned, that are so important, beyond thought leadership, and show how they could solve their target account supply chain issues with their facility management approach. They were taking a bigger level picture. They had content that could show how they could play a strong role in their strategic priorities, which opens higher level conversations than pain points that are only going to maybe speak to facility managers at a site versus a higher level person that makes decisions for various sites. So customer marketing should really play a strong role in ABM, even with account acquisition. But as ABM is really about driving NRR growth, customer marketing also plays a role in protecting and expanding accounts. And in many instances, customer success teams focus on what we did for you, what were the generic benefits that we achieved. And it's basically a sales conversation in the past tense, which is really not going to engage, or if it does at all, lose engagement with the C-suite and VPs. And while sales may have addressed the why change, why now, and why you conversation, many customer success teams don't really have the stories or the insights and the messaging of why stay, why evolve, and why expand conversation. And customer marketing can help shape the conversations that customer success teams have or need to have to deliver those stories and that insight that's going to drive interactions and post-sale experiences. And ABM is really about 100% alignment with future and existing customers. And that customer marketing team is sitting right next to the customer, so they know where they should be getting that understanding that is needed for that alignment. And by helping customer marketing teams become drivers of customer alignment and using the insights to shape customer conversations, we've been able to create ABM programs that have protected key accounts. And I'm talking pretty substantial key accounts, 6-7 figures, for some of our clients like P&G. And they were told that they were going to shift to another competitor, but we helped them retain it. And we were able to create an ABM program that drove growth, margin growth and profitability with large clients like Sephora. So this is something that could really be used on your most important clients. And some companies even have clients that are, a good chunk of the revenue, so they can't afford to lose them.
That's huge. And I think, again, hit the nail on the head with the sales addressing the why change, right? The why now and the why you, but then it's getting lost when it then gets to customer success, because it's then focused on the enablement, the onboarding, the quick win, right? So they're not getting those insights of why stay, why evolve, because they're thinking just in the right now moment, not the future. And I love that with that, some of these challenges come up, because a lot of this can be change management as well too, right? I mean, this isn't something that can be done in a funnel. This is a cross-organizational strategy and approach when done right. So what would you see? The last question we'll have here as we wrap this up would be, what common challenges that companies face in aligning customer marketing and customer success efforts, and how do you recommend and how do you see these challenges being overcome, aside from the change management piece?
Yeah, that's a big piece.
That's a whole other half hour.
Yeah, at least. So like we said, effective sales teams are having that why change, why now, why us conversation to close a deal. But then many internal teams are not taking that same approach when trying to align and integrate teams for ABM. So they go right to, we're going to go into this ABM program. Let's pick our ICP. We'll pick our target accounts, and then we're going to focus on. But before you can do that, you really need to look at the red in the business. And I mean, you need to see what's actually happening. Where do we need to fix the red? What comes when it comes to that account experience, especially when the deal is closed, because a lot of teams forget after a deal is closed that, we need to really keep engagement if you want to keep them in the long term. Otherwise, churn is another issue. But we need to understand what we need to change, and then we can work on the how. So we've been focusing on this conversation for GRR and NRR. So let's talk about GRR, what kind of questions you want to ask your team. What accounts are indifferent, what accounts are maybe disengaged, which ones are at risk of leaving, why are they, disengaged, indifferent, or even at risk, and how do we quickly change that delivery team interactions experiences to protect those at-risk accounts so that we are delivering a better experience? And how can we sync sales, customer, and customer success teams? But when you're also looking at NRR, how much margin growth are you leaving on the table with these tier 1 accounts, your most high value accounts? How do we need to change the relationship and the buying behavior of those tier 1 accounts? And how are sales and marketing and customer success teams losing engagement with those key decision makers, or failing to continue that multi-threading once a deal is signed? Because I think a big piece of this is once we close a deal, we kind of forget that we do need to continue the engagement with the people that made the initial decision, because when it comes to renewing, they're going to be the ones that are going to care. And if we have lost, interaction with them, it's going to be a lot harder to try to re-engage with them once renewal comes, as opposed to try and keeping that constant engagement.
It's very good. And I think kind of the main thing you mentioned there, again, the multi-threading, and that circles back to the change management, but it's the finding out what actually is happening. What do we need to fix, right? And that comes back to full circle of what you were talking before, of making sure that we're looking at the right segments, right? The right use cases. It all full circle comes back and connects. And we do have a couple more minutes. So we have one question that came in from the live chat of how do you suggest staying on top of the engagement?
Staying on top of engagement? Well, that has to be something that everyone's doing. So it can't just be, like you said, just a marketing thing. It can't be a customer success or even a sales thing, or even just say, oh, customer marketing's got it handled. But you can only do so much. You can only do so much. So again, it has to be a change management thing. And I would say, if you're not doing like a monthly or quarterly check-in to make sure everything's okay, and seeing that, other than like the regular check-ins that you do with the person that's using it, but you need to make sure that you're still engaging with those people that were initially on that decision-making committee. And of course, that's getting bigger and bigger, but again, another conversation.
Yeah, because the user is not always the one who saw the pain of why you needed to use this service, solution, product, whatever it may be. So bringing them back in, right? It could even be if it's executive business reviews or quarterly business reviews. Those aren't always to be with the power users or the existing champion. It needs to go back to bring in sales, right? Who was part of the answering the why question. Bring in on the customer, on the client side of who made that decision. So good point. So that's really all that we have for today. We covered a lot, from your approach of what ABM covers, the go-to-market problem that's out there and universal across, I think, every industry, not just SaaS, but it's literally every industry. So making sure, again, that we're following strategic initiatives, like that's a common thread. And I think it's going to be even more important in 2024 as companies look to expand existing business, right? New logos are even harder than ever. And the other aspect of just we talked about how to integrate account-based marketing and customer marketing, contributing to that revenue growth, and some challenges to make that happen. So I love all of your insights, your expertise, and your examples. So I appreciate you sharing those. And we have one more question we can get that came through. So we have a question that, what would you say are your top 3 metrics for measuring? Knowing that there are many more, obviously.
Oh, for measuring metrics, top three. Okay. So for me with ABM, I try to aim for, when we're putting an account through, like if we're targeting specific accounts and they're running through the ABM strategy, I want to see that deal be at least 2 times, if possible, than it normally is, because we're putting so much effort into it. We also have to see, how are deal sizes? Are they actually, this goes back, how are they increasing with ABM accounts? How are deal sizes increasing? And then how are they staying more how are they staying longer with each renewal? Are they expanding? Are they tightening their budget? How's that going? And then what is the cost to serve? What is the cost to retain? And what is the cost to expand? If we can try to drill down the numbers, I know data is very important and these kind of metrics are really important. And again, going back to that engagement, another one would be, what's that engagement across the organization after the deal is closed? Do we keep it up? And obviously there's going to be different levels of engagement with different decision makers, but are we keeping it engagement across after the deal? Because if you can say yes or no, I'm sure it'll also see if that client renews, expands, or even churns.
Very good. I like that. Yeah, I think that's probably that last metric or thing to track. It's probably not done too often, but it's a simple yes or no. Is the engagement internally continued, right?
Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
not hard to track at all.
Yeah, it's the simple ones are the ones that always become difficult, right?
They elude us.
All right, so thank you very much for everyone who joined us for this month's Customer Expert Exchange with Kristina. Appreciate your time. Wealth of knowledge. You can see the ticker at the bottom. If you'd love to chat a little bit more with Kristina, personalabm.com. Check out her website there, as well as her podcast. And she can schedule a session with you to talk a little bit more about this. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you everyone for joining.